Today I want to go over and talk about a passage from 2 Kings 7, chapter 7, and I'm going to read the text today. It says, Elisha replied, "Hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Lord says. About this time tomorrow, a seah of the finest flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria." The officer on whose arm the king was leaning said to the man, "Look, even if the Lord should open the floodgates of heaven, could this happen?" "You will see it with your own eyes," answered Elisha, "but you will not eat any of it." Now there was 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate, and they said to each other, Why stay here until we die? If we say, we will go into the city, the famine is there, and we will die. And if we stay here, we will die. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, we die. At dusk they got up and went to the camp of the Arameans, and when they reached the edge of the camp, no one was there. For the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army. So they said to one another, "Look, the king of Israel has hired the Hittites and the Egyptian kings to attack us." So they got up and fled at dusk and abandoned their tents and their horses and donkeys. They left the camp as it was and ran for their lives. The men who had leprosy reached the edge of the camp and entered one of the tents and ate and drank. They took silver, gold, and clothes and went off and hid them. They returned and entered another one of the tents and took some of the things from it and hid them also. They said to each other, "What we are doing is not right. This is a day of good news, and we are keeping it to ourselves. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us. Let us go at once and report this to the royal palace." We kind of have an interesting story unfold, and what was going on in Israel at the time was there was a severe famine, and they all felt like they were going to die. And so basically the Lord made a prediction that there would be food, and a seah of flour would sell for just around a shekel, and that was not very much for food, but the famine was so severe that it seemed unbelievable to the captain that the king was leaning his arm against, and he said, even if the Lord should open the floodgates of heaven, how could this be? So, the prophet said to the captain, "You will see it with your own eyes, but you will not eat any of it." And so what ends up happening was there was this camp of lepers, and they were all practically starving to death themselves. And so what happened in between that time was the Arameans were camped to try to make war with Israel, but then they heard a miraculous sound that made them actually think that the Israelites had hired the Egyptian kings and the Hittite kings to attack them. And so they ran for their lives. They turned tail and fled and left their camp behind and left everything they had there. And so the lepers end up discovering this camp, and they start to eat, and then eventually they say to themselves, well, we can't leave this good news all to ourselves. We can't just keep the good news to ourselves. Let's go back to Israel and tell them about it, and so on and so forth. And so that is how this ends up happening. And so after those events, after that happens, after the food becomes available to the people, the captain gets trampled by all the people who are basically starving to death. It was worse than a Black Friday mall shopping spree, where we've heard of people getting trampled when people are trying to get to the Best Buys and stuff like that. And so basically that kind of scenario plays out there, and so the captain of the king gets trampled to death. Lepers eventually reasoned with themselves that they were not doing the right thing by keeping the secret to themselves, and so they went and shared it. They basically said, well, if we wait to share this good news until the daylight, punishment will overtake us. And we got to think about our Christian life in kind of that same same regard. We have good news to share with those around us, with the world, with the people who live in the world. This was a desperate situation in Israel, and the people were losing hope in God's deliverance. But, they brought this on themselves because of their own sins, but God ends up bringing about this miraculous set of events that ends up providing food for the people so they do not practically starve to death. And so the lepers felt like it would be wrong to keep and hoard that good news to themselves. In essence said, if we wait until daylight to share this good news, then punishment will overtake us. But in the same kind of context, in the same kind of sense, we should be out doing the work of the Lord, sharing the good news while it's still the dark night of this life. We should not wait until the daylight breaks forth of Christ's return and then have to face him and say, I just kept my mouth shut all this time. And we're going to look at a story where Jesus taught about a servant, where he entrusted his servants to a certain amount of money for each of them to put to good use. And we'll see how one servant just wasted his time and buried his talent. Look at the parable Jesus taught about, where he wants us to be faithful stewards of what he's entrusted us with. And it says, "Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag of gold, each according to his own ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag of gold went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money." And so we see here there was 2 servants that actually made the most of what they had been given. They had put it to use and gained for their master. But this one guy just goes out and buries it and says, not going to do anything with it. Well, eventually the master does return, and he ends up having a chat with each of them to see how they put to use what he's given them. And with 2 bags of gold also came, "Master," he said, "you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." And to the man who had received 1 bag of gold came to him and said, "Master," he said, "I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you." His master replied, "You wicked and lazy servant, so you knew I harvested where I have not sown and gathered where I have not scattered seed. Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they think they have will be taken from them. And throw this worthless servant outside into darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." What we got to understand is everything we enjoy in life, and life itself is like that bag of gold that God has entrusted to us to make the best use of. So we're given our lives, we're given the blessings that we are surrounded with in our lives, and we're given the good news, and when we receive it, we enter into newness of life. And as a result of that, we should be excited to share this good hope with other people. But, if we are not doing the work God has for us to do, we will ultimately be ashamed upon his return, like the master who hid his gold in the ground. No, like the servant who hid his master's gold in the ground and did nothing with it. And so too, any true Christian, any true believer who's truly saved by the grace of God should be filled with so much joy they want to share this news with others. And so we cannot just hoard it to ourselves. Paul even said in Corinthians, "Woe is me if I do not preach the gospel. And so we have a duty to do as Christians to go out and share the good news whenever an opportunity presents itself. I mean, there are some people who are better at sharing it than others, but, just like one servant received 5 bags of gold and another 2, it says they each received them, each according to their own abilities. And so God's not looking at how talented we are or how skilled we are at something, but the effort we put behind it. Now, imagine your life is like that bag of gold. What are you doing with the life, the talents, and the blessings God has given you? I mean, we only have one life. We only have what we are given and the blessings that we're given. So the truth is, we ought to, as believers, make the most use of that life we're given, because that is a gift too. It's something that God has entrusted us with. We should make the most use of our life, our talents, our time, and our treasures to serve and glorify Him and to work towards something that would honor and please Him and glorify His name and advance His kingdom. And so we got to think about it this way. Everything we enjoy in this life is basically like a bag of gold that God has trusted us with, that He's given us a responsibility to manage well. And so we can't just look at ourselves as owners of things that we enjoy and that we're blessed with, our family, our friends, our talents, our blessings, that so many blessings that we enjoy. We got to take a look at ourselves and say, I am a manager, I am not the owner. God has blessed me with this. How can I use this to best serve and glorify Him and His kingdom and advance the work He has called for me to do? And so I think if we look at life that way, we can definitely put ourselves in a position to see it from a different perspective. Because if we think, I just own all this good stuff, we're not going to be as responsible in handling what we've been given if we think we're the sole owners rather than the entrusted managers that the Master has allowed for us to enjoy these things. Everyone has the same talents. Not everyone has the same amount of talent in this particular area, but, the point is, whatever God has gifted us with, whatever He has made us talented in, we should be using it to serve and glorify His name if we are truly believers. We should not be just using it for self and for our own selfish agendas or stuff like that. But we should be using it in a way that would glorify God and not bring dishonor to Him, of course. And so we shouldn't just look at ourselves and compare ourselves with other Christians. Maybe some Christians are better at preaching and teaching the Word of God than others, but, we all have our own unique spiritual gift, and God expects us to use the spiritual gift He's given us to the best we can. It's like the Master entrusted each of His servants a bag. One He gave 5 bags of gold, one He gave 2 bags of gold, and one He gave 1 bag of gold. And so the point is, spiritual gifts are kind of like those bags of gold too. Some people have multiple spiritual gifts when they got saved. God's given them multiple spiritual gifts. So to some, God's given only maybe 1, or maybe some people have more spiritual gifts than others, but that is not the point. The point is, are we using our spiritual gift or gifts to serve and glorify His kingdom? And it's not a matter of who seems to be more talented or gifted in this or that matter. It's our desire to serve and glorify God through what He has given us. And without comparing ourselves to somebody else, all we can do is do our part that God has assigned us to the best of our ability with faithfulness, and we will be rewarded by the Master. And we should be waiting for His return, and we should be serving Him well in the meantime. I hope you found this message encouraging. God bless.